Shakespeare's use of images in the tragedy Macbeth. One of the most striking features of Macbeth is its rich use of recurring images. The preeminently distinguished Shakespearean scholar Caroline Spurgeon once indicated that the iterative image in Macbeth was that of a man in ill fitting garments, which of course led to the following interpretations. A. Shakespeare looked on his hero as a small man in garments too large for him. B. The garments were stolen. The garments in this case, of course, the kingship that was usurped by Macbeth. And C. Macbeth's hypocrisy. Anyway, since the publication of R.B. Heilman's books on King Lear and Othello, W.H. Clemens's The Development of Shakespeare's Imagery, and G. Wilson Knight's series of interpretations, the concentration on a single iterative image, the concept of which was enunciated by Caroline Spurgeon, even though numerically predominant, was apt to be a misleading one. The total meaning of each play, it is now believed, depends on a complex of interwoven patterns, and the imagery of a particular play must be considered in relation to character and structure. It may, however, be mentioned that the particular image of ill-fitting robes may be considered in relation to a wider group of tailoring images predominant in the play. And Kenneth Muir, in his book Aspects of Macbeth, points out that the imaginary tailor admitted by the porter of Hellgate in the porter scene may be regarded as a kind of patron. Kenneth Muir, in his seminal treatise on images in Macbeth, also refers to the critic Clint Brooks, who called attention to the fact that Shakespeare used images that dealt with babes, children, babies. It has been suggested by Muriel C. Bradbook that Shakespeare may have noticed in the general description of the manners included in Holinshed's Chronicles that every Scots woman would take intolerable pains to bring up and nourish her own children. And it has been, of course, elsewhere pointed out by critics that one of the topics selected for debate before King James I during his visit to Oxford in 1605 was whether a man's character was influenced by a nurse's milk. Of course, we have references galore to children, babies in Macbeth. The first that comes to my mind is Lady Macbeth's exhortation to Macbeth: "Come to my woman's breasts and suck me, and take my milk for gall, you murdered ministers." And later when she says, "I have given suck and know how tender it is to love the babe that milks me, I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out." As I said in my introduction, that one of the most striking features of Macbeth is the rich use of recurring images in the play. It would be, I think, prudent to segregate these images and deal with them piecemeal. I would first like to refer to images of blood in the play. The most dominant image in the play is that of blood, which of course reflects the predominance of violence, especially under Macbeth's rule. In Act 1, Scene 2, line 18, We are told how Macbeth's sword smoked with bloody execution. And in the dagger scene, the dagger that Macbeth imagines seeing in Act 2, Scene 1, line 46, and further references to Banquo's gory locks in Act 3, Scene 4, line 51. This image of blood denotes the pervasive violence during Macbeth's despotic rule. It also creates a sense of how appalled Macbeth himself is by what he has done. When he thinks of Duncan's blood on his hand, it seems significant to turn the multitudinous seas red. In Act 2, Scene 2, line 65. Blood also gives an idea of the magnitude of the crime. Subsequently, we find him imagining himself wading into a river or lake made of blood, into which, where he too, I quote, wade no more, returning whereas tedious as go ever. You find this line in Act 3, Scene 4, lines 136, 138. And, of course, in the sleepwalking scene, we find how Lady Macbeth is unable to remove the stain of blood from her mind. Hears the smell of the blood still. This is in the first scene of the fifth act, line 44. It has been pointed out by critics that blood also signifies kinship, and images of bloodshed and violence, and also reflect the ways in which Macbeth ruthlessly severs family bonds. And this violation of family ties, the severing of family bonds, may be found in the way in which Macbeth robs Malcolm, Donalbain, and Fleance of their fathers, and Macbeth of his whole family. The second point that I wish to make when I discuss images in Macbeth would, of course, be to supplement what Caroline Spurgeon said regarding the iterative image in the play, that of a man in ill-fitting garments. When Macbeth is awarded the title of Thane of Cawdor, he wonders why he is dressed in borrowed robes. Act 1, Scene 3, lines 106. And Banquo suggests that new honours are like our strange garments, cleave not to their mould, but with the aid of use. Act 1, Scene 3, lines 143-45. Macbeth says that the golden opinions he has received should be worn now in their newest gloss, not cast aside so soon. In Act 1, line 7, lines 32-35. Macbeth, however, despite the borrowed robes that he has put on, is not comfortable in his official role, as the rebel Scottish lords observe that Macbeth feels his title hang loose about him, and I quote, like a giant's robe upon a dwarfish thief. This occurs in Act 5, Scene 3, lines 20-22. Then, thirdly, there are images of nature in Macbeth. Just as Duncan's murder subverts the conventional social order, the natural order, too, seems to be inverted. In Act 2, Scene 4, line 16, you find how Duncan's horses have turned wild in nature, and a falcon was like a mousing owl hawked at and killed. In Act 2, Scene 4, line 13. There are references to birds in the play. One group associates birds with family integrity and loyalty. When Duncan enters Inverness, the castle at Inverness, You have him describing the temple haunting martlet at Inverness. And later, when Lady Macduff, invokes the poor wren that will fight her young ones in her nest against the owl, this also substantiates how Lady Macduff and her son were murdered by Macbeth in that scene. Therefore, in Shakespeare's references to birds in the play, whereas one group associates birds with family integrity and loyalty, as described earlier, there are references to blackbirds. When Lady Macbeth receives Macbeth's letter, she says that the raven himself is hoarse, etc. in Act 1, Scene 5, lines 37-38. There are numerous references to snakes and scorpions, which signify danger and treachery. Lady Macbeth feels that one must look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. Or in Act 1, Scene 3, in Act 3, Scene 2, line 13, she says how they have scorched the snake, not killed it. Later, Lady Macbeth also asserts, when Macbeth betrays his uncertainty, doubts, etc., that his mind is full of scorpions. There are images of order and disorder in the play. There are images of natural phenomena that are either extremely unnatural or deeply foreboding. In this case, there are critical treatises by critics which, of course, draw parallels with the scene in Julius Caesar where Casca and Cicero meet and describe the storm that is brewing, the external storm, the storm in the external world clearly reflecting the storm that Rome is presently undergoing. So there are images of natural phenomena that are either extremely unnatural or deeply foreboding. You can have a banquet in a conventionally functioning society, which of course suggests order and peace. But in Macbeth, the banquet soon turns into an embarrassing disaster. Then, of course, there are images of infection and disease. And I would like my students to find these out and write a short paragraph on the images of infection and disease that are there in the play. Then there are images of light and darkness, which of course represent forces of good and evil. Consider the two utterances. Duncan in Act 1, Scene 4, line 41-42 talks of the signs of nobleness like stars that shall shine on all deservers. And Macbeth, referring to the stars in Act 1, Scene 4, line 50-51, stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires. The witches, you must remember, are associated with darkness. Banquo says they are instruments of darkness in Act 1, Scene 3, line 23. And both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth invoke darkness to help them fulfill the witches' prophecies.